It's Pete from Cheap Homesteading, and I'm working in the garage today, and I'm working on the Massey 231. Today we're going to install the bell housing, we're going to put on the clutch, we're going to basically finish up the back of the motor, and there is really only a few more things on the front, and this thing is ready to go in. So let's go. So first we're going to install the bell housing, and you know, I don't think you need to put silicone, but I like putting silicone on this piece to the block because I hate it when moisture kind of seeps in through and it all rusts. So I am going to put a little bead of silicone around there and here, and we're going to install this. We're just going to smear it around a bit. I hate putting any chemicals on my hands much anymore. Normally I work with gloves, but okay, so there's two dowels here, and I'm going to get them up in place. I do like using thread locker on most of the bolts, especially internal components. I do not want them coming loose. So I put thread locker on them, and you know what, that Permatex thread locker, that stuff works good. You know, you don't always need to get Loctite. I don't know what I'm going to do with all my extra spare time after this project is done. It's been eating up a lot of time. So, and there's two cheese head bolts up here, which they're little Allen head bolts, but the reason they call them cheese head bolts because it looks like a little cheese on the end. Okay, so now we're gonna tighten them up, and it's like anything. We tighten it evenly. You tighten one here, one here, one here, one here, so you don't tighten down one side fully. That is never good. That is probably one of the big things you got to make sure that you do is when you tighten down anything, you tighten it down evenly. Okay, so it's starting to look a lot more like a motor. And I'm going to do my last tighten. So there you go, those are tightened. We're going to install the flywheel. So with these old tractors, you really have to be careful. You don't blow off like the clutch or the actual pressure plate or anything like that. A lot of these tractors had asbestos in them, and that stuff will kill you over time. So don't be blowing it up in the air. So I'm just going to wipe it off the best I can, scrape it, and we're going to install it. Now this thing is pretty heavy, so you be careful you don't get your hands pinched or anything like that. Okay. I am going to use this as a lineup and then shove it onto here. So I found something. The bolts that hold the flywheel on, I thought were replaced or something at one time, because the Perkins book showed locking clips that go from two bolts. And when I looked here, I saw there's a bolt and just a straight washer. And That kind of concerned me, but they actually, in the actual manual, shows a washer and a bolt. So we're all good. We're going to torque it the way they say, and she should all be good. Okay, we're going to mark these. Okay, so there you go. We got the flywheel on, and we're going to put the pressure plate in the clutch, and we should be pretty much on target to get this in by the weekend. I was able to work on it last night, and I didn't make a video because it was painfully boring. So I installed the alternator, the water pump, got the front pulley on. So basically all I have to do is put this clutch in, bolt it down, and we are ready to go. Okay, so this clutch looks a lot newer than the actual tractor, so I think this has been changed. Even this disc really looks like it hasn't been used very much. So we are going to reinstall this. Okay, so my buddy had the clutch alignment tool for it, so it saves a lot of work. Basically what this is each step measures, so it'll line up that disc and that disc, and it'll go into the pilot bearing. So whenever you tighten it down, it's ready to be installed. Because if you just tighten it down, this will be a little off, this will be a little off, and you'll really have to work at it to get it to go in. So you're gonna get 1/4 inch national course, and you put one here, one here, one here. And what you're doing is compressing these springs, so it takes the tension off this disc. So when you put it up in there, you can move it around and get the bolts to line up. Here is the lineup tool. We're gonna get that to go in, and we're gonna pop it up in there. Okay. We gotta get this over and get these lined up with this bolt, these bolts. And then we get this into the pilot bearing. And now we get these started. So basically I'm gonna tighten everything in just snug, and then I'm gonna take one out at a time, put Loctite on it, and then I'm gonna torque them all. I put thread locker on everything, especially stuff that's internal. You don't want any of that coming loose. If all you did was torque it, it probably would be fine, but thread locker is just that little bit of extra insurance. So I like any internal component, I try to put thread locker on it. So we are going to look up the clutch. Tractor workshop manual, reverse powertrain, that's the head. Okay, so I didn't tell you the actual torque. It's because I used a universal torque spec. So when you go and do one of these engines, just go print one off the internet and torque the bolts to what they say, unless you have a manual or whatever. But it's better to torque it than not. You don't want these bolts coming loose in the bell housing. You possibly could even punch a hole in the bell housing. So make sure you use thread locker and torque them. So now we're going to torque the pressure plate. Then I mark it. So now we're going to remove the pull bolts, and it's going to release the clutch. So there you go. Now that puts the pressure back on the disc. So when you remove this, the discs stay in place. So there you go. She's all lined up. Okay. So you got the main input shaft and the PTO shaft that's got to line up. So it's going to be a little bit of wiggling. So you wiggle, you turn the engine, you try to put the PTO in gear, turn the PTO shaft, get it all to line up, and it should just slide in. Turn, turn. Oh, something happened. It kind of went in. Definitely went in a bit farther. We're going to back it up just a bit. Oh, there it is. It went in. Okay, so let's see if we can throw a few bolts in. I'm going to get a few bolts just so they have a bit of tension. Okay, so you keep wiggling it and tightening it and wiggling it and tightening it till it kind of goes in on its own. Never just pull the bolts in because you could be pulling it in crooked. It might not be on the actual splines of the shaft, and you're going to destroy your clutch or break something else. So this one's on, and this one is there too. Okay, so there you go. The engine is bolted up. Well, 4 bolts anyways. So I got that part bolted up, and we're going to drop the crane down, and the engine is going to be hanging on the transmission. This makes me pretty happy. It's nice to see it actually installed on the transmission. I can see some progress. Okay, so now I got to track down most of these bolts. Okay, that one's on. Oh, this one down here. Okay, that one goes there, I think. I'm pretty happy. My goal for the day was to get the engine hanging on the transmission, and it already is. If I can get this thing all bolted down, the next time I start working on it, I can actually bring the front end in and get that all bolted down. I have some wiring to fix and stuff like that, so it's far from done, but it's definitely took a bit of an upturn. So there you go. The engine's on the transmission. It is 9 o'clock, and I think I've had about enough. So I'm going to go in, but tomorrow is going to be a pretty good day. We're going to try to bring in the front clip and get that bolted down. See you guys. Have a good one.